Welcome back to everybody's favorite game show, except it's not a game show, and it's not everybody's favorite, but it is here. BS with S.A.C. It's completely in two pieces now. I really need to get some glue. When last we left off, we'd started chapter 11, and we saw Olivander moping in a hotel room, in an inn called the Drowned Rat in a town called Freeport. And he felt really guilty because he thought that William had died because he made him go on an adventure that he wasn't ready for. William, meanwhile, had survived, and he and Bloody John were sitting on the bank. John ran off to go hunt for some food. William remembered he had the twin bag, and he just kind of got some food from the Laughing Raven and let Olivander and Sally know that he was alive. So, hooray, they have just finished eating. And that's where we are going to pick up with in this episode. So who's your mysterious benefactor? Bloody John asked, breaking the stillness. Olivander? The Olivander? Bloody John asked, choking on a piece of rabbit. Yeah? You're saying he's here? Now? The pirate looked anxiously about, readying himself to dive into the bag at a moment's notice. No, in Freeport. His wife sent lunch through the twin bag. Bloody John visibly relaxed, shoulders slouching down like wax melting in the sun. He exhaled slowly and whistled. Whew, that was a close one. Why? William asked, curiously. You see, John said, Olivander, he don't exactly got the best reputation for being nice to pirates. Tends to sink their boats and cut 'em up in all manner of unseemly gruesomeness. So are you going to find somewhere else to go when we get to town? Hells no, the pirate replied briskly. You torched my home, you owe me. I'm gonna hide in your bag till you can get me as far away from any port town as possible. I'm not be having neither Olivander nor Longshakes claiming my hide, if you please. Well, William said, you'd better get in the bag now then, because it's time we push off. He rose and packed everything neatly into the bottomless bag, except the dishes, which he returned to Sally. Then he untied the moorings, holding the boat fast, and climbed aboard, pushing off from shore with a paddle and letting the current take him. As the boat drifted downriver toward Freeport, he fashioned the sleeping bag, turned parachute, turned blanket into a hooded robe to conceal his face should Longshanks be in town. He then slid his injured foot into the bottomless bag and pulled it up to the knee, strapping the bag tightly to his thigh. The bag swallowed his leg hole and, to William's estimation, made for a passable stump cover. With a little luck, he could pass himself off as a one-legged beggar. When his rowboat floated from the river into the harbor and up to the docks, he tied a loop in his rope and lassoed a pier post, pulling close. Then, with bottomless bag strapped to his leg, he climbed up from his small vessel and made his way down the wharf toward town. As he walked, the dock clerk ran toward him, waving a slip wildly in the air. You, sir, the clerk called. You have to register your vessel and pay your docking fee. Or what? William asked, gruffing his voice. Or they'll seize your boat. Tell you what, he said in his best Bloody John voice. You pay the fee and it's yours. The clerk didn't seem to care for the arrangement, but William didn't seem to care much for the clerk either. He limped off into the crowd and vanished from the dock workers' sight. The streets teemed with unwashed masses. Pirates and prostitutes outnumbered the honest citizens by a clear-cut majority. Men and women scampered about in clothes that once might have been garish and gaudy, but were too filthy from years of smoke and muck to show much color. They shouted and shoved, cursed and accused, and at times drew blades. He could see local constabulary about, but they seemed indifferent to the misery surrounding them. He hesitated to approach them, to ask directions to the Drowned Rat, but upon comparing them to the rest of the city's inhabitants, decided they were probably the lesser of all evils. Excuse me, he muttered weakly, but do you know where I could find the Drowned Rat? The city guard held out a hand expectantly. My memory seems a bit fuzzy at the moment. Perhaps you have something to remind me? William checked his pockets, but found nothing of value. Sorry, I don't. Then be off with you, beggar, the constable said with a kick to William's crutch, sending him sprawling to the ground. This here's a town for honest, upright citizenry who pay their taxes, not layabouts and moochers who take, yet contribute nothing to our fair city. We believe in order here. Sure you do, William muttered under his breath. Another kick, this time to his gut. What was that, vagrant? Nothing, William gasped. I was simply wondering if you've seen my friend Olivander about. Olivander? Ha! The guard laughed and placed his boot firmly on William's chest, leaning down to the boy's face. Everyone knows that sot's gone soft. Won't leave his precious bar anymore, not that he'd have anything to do with a worthless wretch like yourself anyway. If you're going to name drop, try something more believable. William rolled away from the constable as quickly as he could, fighting his way to his feet between the pushing, shoving mob of unconcerned passers-by. The guard scowled at him as he slipped into the swelling tide of hustlers and rogues. That's right, you petty urchin, he called after him. Leave our fair city and don't come back till you can afford to pay your proper tributes. William weaved his way through the crowds, keeping his eyes peeled for any pubs or inns. It was difficult moving, and not just because of the shoulder-to-shoulder crowds or need for a crutch. His hobble had an unsettling gait to it. Something about having his left leg swing freely when reason told him he should be dragging on the ground unnerved the boy. The sooner he could find the drowned rat, or at least some safe-ish place to sit, the better. William slipped into a small bar near the wharf, where he sat at a table in a corner and asked the bottomless bag for directions. A drowned rat? Bloody John asked. Dunno, that's a bit fancy for me. Come on, Bloody John. Stumpy, he corrected. As long as we're someplace where Longshanks might hear you, the name's Stumpy. Look, Stumpy, you're supposed to be my expert. You're here all the time, making port or taking shore leave or whatever you pirates call it. How can you not know? Like I said, it's above my price range. William groaned in frustration and slammed his fist down hard on the table. Heads rose and turned to survey the stranger talking to a leg in a bag in the corner. Hateful eyes pried away at the shadows, trying to see the face behind the hood. Bugs, William growled. Can't abide a bug at my table. The other patrons of the something inn glared a little longer, then returned to their drinks. William breathed a heavy sigh of relief, shrinking down further into his cloak. I was close, Bloody John whistled. If you were more attentive when you came into town, this wouldn't be an issue. Sorry, Captain, but when a guy like me comes to town, attentiveness ain't exactly what we're itching for. So how am I supposed to find this place that's supposedly too rich for you? Well, John thought, scratching his head. You can't exactly say you're looking for the most expensive place in town, because then people will want to pay out at best, or they'll rob you, thinking you're rich at worst. And you can't ask a pirate in a bag because he won't know, William said, his voice sharp and cutting. Begging your pardon, came Bloody John's offended reply. If I'd have known it was so important to you, I'd have made a mental note last time. Oh, wait, I reckon I didn't know you to care. I should leave you to Longshanks. Threats only get you what you want to know. Threats only get you what you want to know, John said matter of fact. If the person you're threatening knows anything in the first place. Same as bribes. You know, Stumpy, you're absolutely right. Let me see that wineskin. John hung the wineskin on William's foot. William discreetly slipped his hand into the bag and pulled the pouch free. He made his way to the bar and asked for the largest empty bottle the barkeep had, which he filled from the wineskin. Then he turned for all the bar to hear and bellowed out in his most gravelly voice, Who'd like to share a drink with me? Several unsavory fellows followed him to his table in the corner and took their seats around him, each with an empty cup reaching out to be filled. William shared generous portions from the bottle as the men gathered round. I've a mind for some plunder, and I be looking for a crew what can handle the job. Are you men enough to handle a little grand larceny? Most murmured their agreement. A few asked what larceny meant, and were promptly enlightened. What be the most expensive inn in town? Everyone around shouted over one another, desperate to find the first to give the answer that suited the mysterious stranger, in hopes of winning more sweet, strong dwarven wine. The buried treasure! The Jolly Roger! The drowned rat! The drowned rat, ye say? William said, trying to sound surprised. Well, I woke this morning with a drowned rat at the foot of me bed. I sees this as an auspicious sign. Most murmured their agreement. A few asked what auspicious meant, and were promptly enlightened. Here's the plan. I check into the drowned rat. That's where the rich muckety-mucks sleep, yeah? So in the middle of the night, I wakes up, sneaks downstairs, and unlocks the door from inside. Then you fine fellows follow in, and we carry out everything worth a copper that ain't nailed down. That is, of course, unless one of your river rats has a talent with a hammer and can pry up anything with nails." He winked to the gathered knaves, and gave a couple of them nudges with his elbows, who in turn gave winks and nudges to those beside them. Those fellows passed winks and nudges to those beside them until the whole collected assembly became little more than flailing elbows and flickering eyes. William waved his arms to stop the spreading madness, as people not even at the table had begun nudging and winking. "Enough, lads! People will think something's afoot you're carrying around like that." The whole tavern silenced themselves, doing their best to look nonchalant for the many constables who were not present. William brought what remained of the wine below the table, refilling it out of sight, while casting conspiratorial glances around the table. "So, what's to keep someone from, say, killing you and taking your share during all this?" asked a particularly rough-looking fellow in the rear. His eyes were shifty, couldn't look in one spot for longer than a second, and he twirled a blade in the most deliberately threatening, absent-minded knife play meant to look non-threatening that the boy had ever seen. Everything about the man screamed untrustworthy, including the tattoos on his arms bearing words like liar and untrustworthy. William could feel the daggers in his back already. William gulped. "Good question." He coughed to buy himself some time, and kicked hard with his bad leg against the table, hitting with a loud thump. A muffled voice full of annoyance came from below the table. "I was wrong about earlier," said the voice. "I'd rather be left to Longshakes. Just set me free." "What was that?" asked the professional trader. "That," said William, giving the best evil eye he could without actually revealing his face, "was the man what took me leg. So I killed him and bound his soul to me stump for all eternity. Now imagine what I'd do to any knave what thought of taking me life." A hush fell over the table, and the trader slowly backed away, slipping his blade back into his boot. "Now," William said as he placed the newly filled bottle on the table, "who'll show me the way to the drowned rat?" Not long after, William found himself standing in front of the most lavish inn Freeport had to offer, which was to say that they had freshly painted the place several years ago, and the rooms had no more than 2 beds each. Also, despite the name, the establishment was relatively rat-free, depending on the season. However, rather than enter, William waited out front and begged passers-by for change. Much as he had hoped, it took very little time before the local constabulary came for a shakedown. "Hey, you filthy beggar," the city guard called. "What do you think you're doing harassing the clientele of this fine, upstanding establishment?" Excellent. Just the sort of corrupt guard William was hoping for. He figured anyone who described a dump like the drowned rat as being fine or upstanding was on the take and looking for a payout. "Apologies, officer," he said meekly. "I had no idea." The constable eyed the sag to the boy's pockets, estimating the worth of their contents. "There's a vagrancy fine, just so you know. It'll be 1 silver, 5 copper. The constable was good. Corrupt, yes, but he certainly knew the weight of a coin. William pulled every single bit of money he had from his pockets and passed it to the officer. The constable jangled the coins in his hands, savoring the weight, the sweet chime they made when they tapped against each other. Then he slipped them into his pockets as he turned to leave, and find some other citizen to extort. "Now be on your way, urchin." "Of course," said William, "but before you go—" The constable rotated swiftly on his heels, his body locking firmly into place, emphasizing the flow of his buttoned gray cloak as it continued to swirl around him, despite his stillness. Annoyance glimmered in his eyes, a bother that threatened to blossom into violent anger should William play his cards poorly. "I heard earlier tell of some no-good roustabouts planning a second-story job here tonight. A bunch of them. One of them sneaks in and opens up the door for the rest." "And you're telling me this why?" Impatient etched lines along the guard's eyes. "Only to let you know. Doing my civic duty and all, you see. Thinking a mighty fine constable like yourself would be able to handle taking in a dozen or so sneak thieves. Other constables look a little corrupt to me, you see, but you look upstanding like. You wouldn't accept no bribes common criminals like that might try to slip you to get out of trouble. And a big haul like that, breaking up a serious job for this, for the most respectable place in town, might land you a promotion, eh, Captain? I wouldn't mind seeing more honest and true gents like yourself in charge instead of some of them less honest types." The constable smiled, trying his best to mask the greed in his eyes that shone with the luster of someone else's gold. "I appreciate your concern, citizen," he said, flicking a copper back to William. "For your pains." The constable wandered off into the crowd, wheels turning in his head as he went. William could practically hear the sound of loose coins falling from the man's thoughts. When the corrupt guard had disappeared from sight, William opened the door and entered the inn. Before he had time to adjust to the dim light of the seedy lobby, he felt arms close tightly around him. He immediately feared for his life, expecting a dagger to pierce between his ribs at any moment. Then the brawny arms that captured him began to give him reassuring pats on the back. William looked up and blinked until he could make out the features of a particularly tall, powerful, and famous barkeep. "Ollie!" William shouted, and embraced the man back. It was good to be back among people he could trust. "William!" Olivander said back, and hoisted the boy from his feet. "It's so wonderful to see you!" He put William down, and took a long look at him. His mouth dropped wide in shock. "Dear heavens, boy! Your leg! What happened?" "My leg?" asked William, confused. Surely Olivander hadn't forgot that he'd twisted his ankle during his encounter with the wolves and the skeletons. Then he remembered the ruse he'd concocted to avoid Longshank's attention. "Oh! No, the leg! No, it's fine! It's just a disguise!" He undid the rope around his thigh that kept the bottomless bag in place, letting it slide down, revealing an intact limb where none had been before. Olivander laughed and gave the boy a mighty pat on the back, which almost sent him sprawling to the floor. "Very clever," he said with a grin, "though I doubt very much you need to worry about that. Rumor around town is that someone's destroyed the scallywag and old Longshanks with it. Someone's quite the hero, eh?" "Well, that's the rumor, at least." Olivander mistook William's honesty for modesty and offered to buy him dinner, which William politely accepted. He didn't speak much during the meal, preferring to focus on his food rather than answer Olivander's questions or respond to his outlandish assumptions about the boy's heroic prowess. William kept his comments to himself and slipped a little food into the bottomless bag when he could. The old barkeep watched with confusion. "What are you doing, William, my boy?" "Feeding," he replied laconically. "Oh." Olivander turned back to his own meal, eyebrows furrowed. "Feeding what, exactly?" "Pirate." "Oh." A look at his face revealed the gears grinding hard, trying to process the thought. "Oh, I see." William shrugged and continued dropping pieces of meat and bread and cheese into the bag. "And this pirate is called—" "I named him Stumpy. He followed me home when the ship blew up, but I think I'm going to keep him." "Oh," Olivander said, taking a swig of ale for lack of anything useful to say. "Oh, I see." And that's where we're going to stop for tonight, with William and Olivander reunited and a pirate in a bag. All right, I hope you enjoyed your story for this evening. Snuggle up in bed, enjoy your sleep, and as always, have good dreams. Till next time.